Hello, it's Stephen Bedard again, and for this video I thought that I would share how I became a Christian. How did I become a Christian? Well, I'm glad that you asked that. It's actually an interesting story, at least I think it's interesting. I was raised attending church. I attended an Anglican church for much of my childhood and was very actively involved. Was involved, of course, attending Sunday school. In fact, I have a plaque for perfect Sunday school attendance. So there's proof that I attended Sunday school without absence. So I'm very proud of that. Also, I was involved in junior choir. I was involved in ushering. I was a server, which some of you might know as an altar boy. I was involved in serving communion. I was involved in a whole bunch of different things. I helped in different ways, and so that was a big part of my childhood. But as I got into my teens, I got to that stage where a lot of people get, where they start to question what they believe and why they believe it. Are we attending church just because our parents want us to, or because we believe this stuff? And I actually remember one particular time where I was serving communion. Now, I was what was called a chalice bearer, so I was administering the cup with the wine in it. And as I was doing that, I was saying to the people, "The blood of Christ shed for you." And as I did that, I remember, and I can still picture what it was like. I can still see that altar area as I was administering it and realizing and thinking to myself, I'm not sure that I believe this. I don't know that that is true. I don't even know if Jesus was who we say he was, or if there's a God, or if Christianity is the right religion. What about all the other religions? And I remember I made a decision that day that I was going to resign from all of the different ministry areas that I was involved in, and also I was going to stop attending church, because my plan was that I was going to go and study all the religions out there and then make an informed choice for myself. Now that sounds like a very enlightened idea, especially for a 16-year-old, but I didn't follow through with that, other than quitting my ministry roles and quitting church. I ended up getting very involved in heavy drinking at that not long afterwards. And yes, here in Canada, the drinking age is 19, but my drinking started before that, and in that time, I really came to realize that I had become an atheist. I just couldn't see how there could be a God, and I had all kinds of reasons why I thought that. I wouldn't say necessarily well thought out reasons, but I had my reasons, and I certainly didn't have faith that God existed. And that actually drove me more into the drinking, because I didn't feel like that had freed me up to enjoy the best life possible, with no divine judge looking over my shoulder, waiting to slap me down if I stepped out of line. I didn't feel that freedom. I felt despair, that there was no point to life, really. I wouldn't say that I was suicidal, but I didn't feel a lot of hope. And so that was my late teen years, and I eventually enrolled in university, and I started my undergrad. And it was, I think, after my first summer of undergrad, still my drinking had gotten even heavier during that time. I'd gotten very much involved in the university party scene, a lot of nights out at the bar. But something good did happen, in that I had begun to think, and it's not that I was studying philosophy or anything like that. I was actually a business major, but being in a setting that was encouraging people to think about things, I began to look at the world around me with new eyes, and to really look at creation. I began to reflect upon the Big Bang. I began to reflect upon evolution. And I came to realize that I was really struggling with how this universe came about by accident. I was really struggling with how that could be. How could a universe just appear? And of course, I hadn't studied very much about it, but I was instinctively going into an area where philosophers and theologians had reflected for many hundreds of years. And so that was one of the things. The other thing that I was struggling with was, how did life appear on Earth? Now, I had no doubts about evolution. I had no problem with that. I totally believed in that. But evolution by itself didn't explain where life came from. Um, where did that first life form appear? How did it appear? And how did it appear with the potential to be able to evolve into, well, flowers and trees and all of those things, but all of the animals that we have, and especially the most complex of animals, and including human beings? How did all of that happen by accident? And I remember that I came to the conclusion that I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. Now, I know there's a book out there that was written with that title, and I was thinking, though, that same thought long before that book came out. And so I realized I was no longer an atheist. But what was I? Well, I was a theist. I believed that there was a God, but what God? I had no idea. I wasn't prepared just to accept that it was going to be Christianity. In fact, I would say that I put Christianity down a few notches because it seemed too obvious. I was raised in Canada, that just happened to be a Christian majority nation, at least in name, and so I thought there's no reason for me to automatically go there. What if I had been born in Nepal? What if I had been born in Saudi Arabia? All of these would have had an effect on how I was raised. So it wasn't obvious that Christianity was the answer. So I felt, though, the pressure that I need to find out what was the true religion. I really needed to know. And there was only one person I knew that had the answer for that, and that was God. I figured if anybody knows what the true religion is, it would be God. And again, I can still remember laying in my bed at night and praying to God, saying, okay, God, I believe that you're real. I don't know who you are, but I want to know what the true religion is. And I'm not kidding here. I'm not trying to be funny, but there was a PS on the end of my prayer. And the PS was, I pray that it's not the Jehovah's Witnesses. And the reason for that is not because I'd done heavy study on Jehovah's Witness theology. I just they didn't seem to enjoy life, and my interactions with them knocking on the door weren't always pleasant. So I didn't want to be a Jehovah's Witness, but I also realized I was leaving it up to God. So whatever it was, and so that was my prayer. And I don't know what I was expecting the answer to that prayer would be. If there would be some kind of super divine revelation, a vision in my room or anything like that. But I will tell you what did happen. Not long after that, my cousin had been walking down the street, and a business yelled out to him. They just saw him walking by saying, hey, do you want a job? And so he wanted a job, and so he was hired. And then he got a phone call a little bit after that from another job that he had applied for, and they wanted to hire him, and it was going to be better hours and better money. So he called me up and said, hey, do you want this job? And so I'm like, sure, yeah, I don't have a job, and I needed something for summers during university. So I went and worked. Now, it was a used car lot, so forget all your ideas about what used car salesmen are like. But it was a used car lot, which was great. You know, summer job. I could be outside washing cars and work on my tan, and it wasn't too many hours, so I got to relax quite a bit too. Anyways, what I soon realized is that these um, people who were working at this car lot were born again Christians. Now, uh, I don't know fully exactly what I thought a born again Christian was. I thought something like it was someone who had been really messed up, probably a heavy drug user, and then had a radical conversion experience, and that's how they became born again Christians. But anyways, these people were nice enough, but they were very, very zealous for sharing their faith. In fact, this was really ironic because this car lot was, I would say, 2 buildings away from the Anglican church that I grew up in. So I could actually, while I was working, I could see the church that I grew up in. But the message that they were sharing was a fair bit different from what I was brought up with. They were very charismatic, and they would make me stop working every once in a while and just witness to me. And I'm like, okay, if you want to pay me to be witnessed to, that's fine. They would hand me Chick Tracts. Do you remember Chick Tracts? Maybe you've had them before. If not, Google them. You'll find out what Chick Tracts were, but that's what they gave me. Now they were pretty heavy duty in their witnessing, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend some of their tactics. Like one of the things that they told me was that now that they had shared the gospel with me, the devil would try to kill me before I converted, and so I needed to convert as quickly as possible because the devil might kill me. That's not a good way to evangelize. In fact, that pushed me away. If I was leaning towards anything, I changed my mind at that point. And there was also a lot of emphasis on the rapture. The rapture was going to happen any minute, and I needed to become a Christian now, because as soon as the rapture happened, the only way I could be saved is if I was beheaded by the Antichrist. Again, don't do that. That's not a helpful way to share your faith. But the good thing in all of that is, as they were sharing this stuff, and I'm thinking, okay, some of this seems pretty way out there. I need to start reading the Bible for myself, because I am a skeptic at heart. It was skepticism that made me first leave the church. It was skepticism that made me leave atheism in having too much doubts about life and the universe coming about by accident. And so now I was skeptical about what they were saying and how this fit with Christianity. So I began to read the Bible for the first time. I had never read the Bible. We had a couple of Bibles in our house, and so I started reading it. It was one of the Good News Bible, if you remember those, with the little drawings in them. And so I began to read it, and I'd never read anything like that before. I had no idea. Even having grown up in church and Sunday school, I didn't really know these stories, and so I began to read them, and it really challenged me. In fact, it scared me. There's been a couple times I actually stopped, said, I can't do this anymore. If I keep reading, I'm going to become a Christian. And so I was really nervous to do that. But I actually held off in becoming a Christian because part of it was the fear-based thing. There was a lot of a threat of hell that was being used against me to try to get me to become a Christian. And I didn't want to become a Christian out of fear of hell. So I ended up leaving that job, but my journey continued, and I bumped into numerous Christians and had conversations with different people. I continued to read the Bible, and actually went back to my Anglican church and got involved in new ways, and having conversations with my priest. And interestingly, the priest, when he kind of knew the direction I was going in, and he was on the liberal side, and so he was a bit concerned, and so he gave me a book by Tom Harper. And if you know anything about me and some of my apologetics work, you'll know that that's very ironic that the first book that was given to me to try to put me on the right path was a book by Tom Harper. Anyways, things continued to move forward. And one of the big things that happened, though, was I went on a trip to Mexico with a friend of mine, and it was after exams. We thought, let's celebrate the end of the school year by going down to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, for 2 weeks. Sounds great. Now, by this point, because I'd been reading the Bible and making some changes in my life, I had realized that I was drinking way too much, and that was not a good thing. And I recognized that the Bible seemed to say that um, alcohol by itself wasn't necessarily a sin, but overdoing it was. And so I told my friend as we were driving to the airport, I'm willing to drink a little bit, but I'm not planning on getting drunk. Now, my friend was he was my drinking buddy for years then, so he really didn't have a lot of confidence in me, and ends up that he was correct in his estimation of my resolve, because we got onto the plane and they had free alcohol, and I like free stuff, so I drank. I didn't get drunk. I was very careful. I tried to have one drink an hour to keep myself on the straight and narrow, so to speak. Then we arrived in Mexico, and we decided, you know what, we don't really need to go out. We're here for 2 weeks. Why don't we just grab a couple drinks at the hotel bar and turn in, and we have 2 weeks to really see what things are like, and to have a good time. Unfortunately, I mixed very badly when I was at that bar, and I still remember the names of the drinks, but I'm not going to bore them with you, or bore you with them. And so I did that, and now at this point I was drunk. And then my friend had met some people, and they were going to a bar. He said, "Steve, why don't you go up to the room?" And I'm like, "No way." And so I went and started drinking beer now. And so I'm really getting drunk at this point. And my wallet ended up getting stolen with quite a bit of money and all of my ID in it. And then I got kicked out of the bar, which I have a vague memory of why that was. And then I got lost. My friend was still in the bar. He didn't know I was gone. And there I was out in the streets of Puerto Vallarta all by myself, very drunk. And I realized that I just needed to wait and sober up, and then I would be fine. And so I was looking for a place to rest. I saw an older lady walking down the street. I followed her to her house, banged on the door, said, let me in, I need to stay here. She didn't open the door. I don't know why, but she didn't open the door. So I sat down on the curb, feeling sorry for myself. Next thing I know, a police car pulls up, and they put me into the car and take me to jail. And there I was. My first night in Mexico is in a Mexican jail. And it was I would say a cell about the size of my office here. And we had maybe 20 people in. And I was the only tourist that was in there. And it was pretty rough, pretty dirty. And so in fact, as soon as I walked into that cell, I was instantly sober. Instantly. I dozed off maybe a half hour that night. And I remember everything clearly from the minute I walked into there. And so when in the morning came, the guard came by, and I asked him, "How do I get out?" And the guard went like this. And I explained, I don't have any money, but if I could make a phone call, I could have my friend come, and he could pay my way out. And he said, no phone calls. You pay or you don't get out. And at that time, there had been a number of accounts of abuses happening as a result of Mexican police and tourists and stuff like that. So I was pretty nervous at that point, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I was feeling desperate. What am I going to do? And that's when I looked up and I saw Jesus. Well, I saw a painting of Jesus anyways. Mexico is a very Catholic country, and so there's pictures of Jesus everywhere. And right outside the cell there on the wall was a painting of Jesus. I told this story at a Pentecostal church, and they were convinced that I had actually seen a real vision of Jesus. But no, it was a painting. But I do believe it was divinely inspired at that moment. And so I thought, I have nothing else. I have no one else to turn to. And I remembered reading in the Gospel of John about praying in Jesus' name. And so I thought, I'm going to try it. So I prayed, Dear God, get me out of jail in Jesus' name. That's all there was. And now, of course, I did this silently. I wasn't lifting my hands and loudly proclaiming in front of my fellow jailmates. So I did that, and a little bit later, someone in the cell came up to me and said, I'll pay your way out and you can pay me back. And I'm like, really? And then I thought that maybe he was just pulling my leg. But he went out, he paid his fine, and I'm waiting. I'm hanging on the cell, on the bars, like, oh, please, please. And sure enough, they came and got me, and he paid my way out. And it wasn't that he was trying to rip me off. He didn't demand a certain amount or anything like that. But the one thing I had on me was my the key to my safety deposit box, and I had traveler's checks, and the hotel had just been opened, so I got some money out for him and gave him a bit extra, and I got out of jail, and I couldn't believe it. That was, for me, that was a life-changing moment, because I'd been brought up believing in prayer, but believing in the importance of prayer. It never entered my mind that God would actually answer a prayer. I thought prayer was for just like singing hymns and reciting the creed or whatever. It was religious activity. I never thought that God actually heard it, much less answered the prayer. And then coming back to Canada, I had no ID, so I was really nervous about that. And so we arrived in Toronto, and I could hear the customs guy saying, birth certificate, birth certificate, birth certificate, as each one came through. My friend went through, birth certificate. I came through, and the only thing that the guy said to me was, are you with him? Because my friend and I both had the same kind of party hat and funky shorts and the whole bit. And I said, yeah. And he's like, okay, go ahead. And then he asked the next person, birth certificate. I was the only person on the plane that he didn't ask for a birth certificate. So that was pretty incredible. So that really shook me and made me realize I needed to really take this God stuff very, very seriously, that God actually knew who I was. The next step for me, though, because I wasn't sure what that was going to look like. I didn't know if I had what it took to be a Christian. I didn't even understand necessarily what that meant. But I was flipping through the channels, and I came across Billy Graham Crusade on TV. Now, I had watched televangelists before. Me and my parents, we used to watch Jim Bakker and the PTL thing, not because we were interested in it, not because we believed in it. We just thought it was really funny. We thought Jim and Tammy Faye Bakker were very funny, and we, even though they didn't intend to be funny, and I really had a low esteem, very low opinion of televangelists. But I had remembered recently at our Anglican church that our priest, who I knew was quite progressive, had said something positive about Billy Graham, which surprised me. I just didn't think that he would like Billy Graham. So I thought, I'll give this guy a chance. Let's see how long before he starts begging for money. And he didn't beg for money. And in fact, his message was really straightforward. It was nothing to laugh at all. I thought he explained things clearly in a way I could understand. It hit both the head and the heart. I thought, this is really interesting. And it seemed like there was a whole bunch of crusades at that time, and so I kept watching them. But I would find that when he would get to the altar call, I could really feel like God was tugging on me, like that I needed to take a step here. I needed to make this personal. And it was bugging me so much that I would keep watching the crusades, but I would shut it off after the message and before the altar call, because I didn't want to get, I didn't like the conviction that I was under. And then finally I thought, why am I doing this? I've already quit drinking at this point. I wasn't swearing. I was tithing to my church. I was living the life of a Christian. There was nothing left for me to give up other than my will. And so I contacted the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, and they sent some information, and they came to me, and I left the package unopened for a couple days, but eventually I opened it and I prayed. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that someone needs to pray the sinner's prayer to become a Christian. I have blogged about that in other places, and maybe I'll have a talk about that on my YouTube channel here. But I did make a commitment to Jesus there, and something did change. I wouldn't say it was a real emotional time. There wasn't tears going down my face or anything like that, but I really felt like something changed. And I wouldn't say that's the end of the journey. In some ways, that was the beginning of the journey, but that's where I'm going to end off for now. So that's how I became a Christian. God has done a lot of stuff through me. My understanding of the Bible has changed a lot. My understanding of theology has changed a lot, and that's good. Those are good things to be happening, and I expect that I will continue to learn and grow. So thank you for watching this video, and I hope that you will subscribe to the channel and to share the story. Maybe this is something that will be helpful to someone else who might be struggling with whether or not they should become a Christian. Thank you, and God bless.